A few weeks ago, Sigma announced the release of their new 35mm f1.4 DG-DN, though another really popular 35mm option with the same kind of price bracket is the Sony 35mm f1.8 FE, not to be confused by the Sony 35mm f1.8 for APS-C cameras. No, the one we're looking at today is designed for full frame cameras. So, which of these lenses is the best? The Sony 35mm f1.8 is way smaller and lighter than the Sigma, coming in at just 280 grams or 9.9 ounces, but this is mainly down to the fact that it has a smaller maximum aperture of just 1.8. Though don't get me wrong, the Sigma is still relatively lightweight and small when compared to other 35mm f1.4 lenses currently available for the Sony E-mount, coming in at 640 grams or 22.6 ounces. But let's be honest, when placed side by side, the Sigma just looks about as dainty as James Corden in spandex. It's an image I won't get out of my mind anytime soon. Both of these lenses are nicely put together, constructed from a mixture of metal and hard plastics, though when you compare the lenses side by side, it's obvious that the Sony is the cheaper of the two options. Both lenses have a dust and moisture resistant design and include rubber O-rings around the metal lens mounts for further protection from the elements. Now, although both lenses include MF to AF switches and a customizable button, the Sigma has the added bonus of including a declickable manual aperture ring that has the option to lock into auto mode using a handy lock switch on the side. The Sigma also has a larger rubberized focus ring, whilst the Sony opts for a smaller textured metal dial. The action on these manual focus rings for both of these lenses is as smooth as a freshly waxed ball sack, and very accurate too, making focus pulls an absolute breeze. If I had to pick a favourite, although I prefer the larger rubberized dial on the Sigma, I do have to say that the Sony is the slightly nicer of the two lenses to operate, as it's slightly more responsive and requires less rotation to complete a full focus pull. As for cost, the Sony is the cheapest option, priced at £549 or $699, making it very affordable. The Sigma, on the other hand, is slightly more expensive, retailing at around £749 or $899, but you still won't need to remortgage your house to afford it. So when it comes to scoring, the Sony lens has to get the point in this round for being the most cost-effective option. In terms of build quality, although they are both nicely put together, the Sigma definitely has the higher quality finish and wins the point. For handling, I've got to give the point to the Sony, as it's just so much smaller and lighter than the Sigma and would equally be as nice to use on a full-frame camera or a crop sensor camera. Both of these lenses are compatible with my Sony a7 Mark III's IAF and face detection, and in good lighting conditions they're both quick and accurate to focus with absolutely no signs of hunting. In low light, they both continue to focus flawlessly. When shooting wide open in continuous burst mode, both lenses are able to keep up with a moving target approaching the camera. Of the 18 photos that we shot, the Sigma was the only one to produce one image that was out of focus, though in fairness it does have the harder job here, seeing as that it has a maximum aperture of f1.4 compared to the Sony's f1.8, so I'm going to give it a bit of slack here. So that means both lenses deserve a point in this round. These lenses even work flawlessly in video mode too. When shooting wide open at these lenses' respective maximum apertures, they were able to track our model Katie as she walked towards the camera at a regular pace. They could even keep up when she walked at a faster pace too. As for AF noise, neither of these lenses produce any motor noise at all. If you like to capture video footage that makes you feel travel sick every time you complete a focus pull, then good news, the Sigma is the one for you, because focus breathing is a little bit of a problem for this lens. Whereas on the other hand, the Sony has very little focus breathing, so this is probably the option to go for if you do a lot of video work. Despite the focus breathing being an issue with the Sigma, I think both lenses performed very well when it came to AF and video mode, so both of them deserve a point in this round. Now obviously, with the Sigma having the slightly wider maximum aperture of f1.4, the bokeh it produces is slightly thicker and smoother than that produced by the Sony when set to f1.8. This is particularly noticeable in this shot where we have a rather complex background and the bokeh created by the Sony looks a little bit messy, whilst the Sigma lens produces a much smoother and pleasing result. In our bokeh balls test, neither result was perfect, to be honest, with both of these lenses creating round orbs at the centre, but they turn into misshapen balls of light towards the edges of the frame. So in this round, I think the Sigma clinches the point here due to its wider maximum aperture and much nicer bokeh. Although flaring is present with both of these lenses, the Sony definitely handles it better, with the Sigma footage looking much more washed out, probably due to the lens's larger maximum aperture and front element. When shooting wide open, both of these lenses have a touch of pincushion distortion and dark corners, though the real difference can be seen when we zoom in. The Sony appears to have much more contrast than the Sigma, and although the sharpness levels are very, very close, the Sony appears to create crisper looking images due to the increased contrast. At the corners, the Sigma is very soft, whilst the Sony is still soft but noticeably sharper than the Sigma in comparison. At the lens's minimum focusing distance, you can immediately see the difference in contrast, and when zoomed in, the Sony is the sharper of the two options. On our longitudinal chromatic aberration test, the Sigma lens has significant blue fringing at the top, turning into amber at the bottom, whilst the Sony shows green fringing at the top and magenta fringing below the area of sharp focus. As is often the case in these head-to-head tests that I conduct, in real life, these small flaws are slightly harder to spot, and after working up some of the images in Lightroom, I was really happy with the images produced with both of these lenses. Neither of these lenses display any kind of noticeable color cast, so skin tones look natural straight out of the camera. The good news is that both of these lenses provided me with a shed load of images to choose from, with none of my images being horribly misfocused or unusable, despite shooting wide open for the entirety of the shoot. So at the end of this round, the Sony has to get the final point, as it clearly produces sharper and more contrasty images compared to the Sigma. So when we tally up the scores, the cheaper Sony f1.8 is actually the winner of our matchup here due to its cheaper price, smaller build and superior image quality, once again proving my theory that size does not matter. That's right, Tom. Keep telling yourself that. That's it. Happy thoughts. Now, although this Sony lens is clearly a fantastic 35mm option, as we've just seen from our test, the biggest downfall of this lens has to be its subpar bokeh quality. So if you're somebody who has to have the best bokeh for your buck, then you're probably going to be better off spending a little bit more money and getting an f1.4 or an f1.2 option like the Sigma we've just tested. But which lens should I pick, Tom? Well, luckily for you, I have tested all of the 35mm f1.4 and the one random Sigma 1.2 option that are available for Sony E-mount cameras in this video over here. So be sure to check that out now to see which lens is currently the best option available to you.